In direct opposition to gun control advocates, the Second Amendment wasn't created to shoot large and delicious animals. It wasn't primarily created to have a supplemental to a standing army. And it wasn't even created for personal safety. It is the codification of political violence in the Bill of Rights as a constitutional safeguard against tyrannical governments, right? And it's written, our Bill of Rights is written in a very particular way for a very particular reason. First Amendment, I have the right to freedom, I have freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom to redress grievances with my government. Second Amendment, oh, you're not responsive to the fucking people? Bang, you fucking die. That's why it's there. Now, that being said, there is something to be said about the operational impact of like the development of small arms and weapons becoming more lethal, and like the impact of revolutionary disruptive technologies undermining the ability of civilian ownership of small arms to protect your personal safety or political freedom. That's actually in my Second Amendment lecture in the Intelligent Patriotism lecture series that I do for the Soldiers and Statesmen Foundation. That being said, so that's true. I mean, those are all things we have to take into account, right? Again, like the firearm of today is not like the firearm of yesterday. That's true. There's even with the increase of lethality of small arms because of like the impact of things like AI and fully autonomous weaponized drone swarms and pick whatever. Like there are people who, and I'm very pro Second Amendment. They're like, well, I have this like my sidearm, and that means that I'm protected. No, you're not protected. Having civilian ownership over firearms gives you the chance to potentially respond to traditional threats should the traditional threat present itself to you in a manner that allows you to respond. So, for instance, what does having access to small arms do against saving you from bioterrorism? Nothing. What does access to small arms have anything to do with saving you from a kid making a V-bid? Nothing. What does having access to small arms do against saving you from, say, the DC sniper, who was an Islamic fundamentalist whack job, part of the Nation of Islam, that trained his 12-year-old kid to hide in the fucking trunk of a car, open up a little hole, and just snipe people while they're at gas stations and drive away? One of the things we pushed was ShotSpotter to catch that piece of shit. Nothing. So what does it all shake out? While you are in the unflattering position where not having access to small arms will definitely make you more vulnerable, possessing one doesn't make you secure. And that's a really goddamn dangerous place to be. In other words, people's notion of the Second Amendment needs to be contemporized. That doesn't mean supporting gun control. I'm saying understand what the spirit of the Second Amendment was and how that manifests itself in today's environment, right? Well, what about like the law? Well, okay, so the law, when it was discussed at the Supreme Court, said the Second Amendment protects both, militias and individual ownership over firearms, like civilian ownership of firearms. What it also said is that the Second Amendment only constrained the federal government. And that's true. And so gun control advocates went, well, great, we're going to use state and local government to create state and local ordinances to deny you your Second Amendment right. That actually happened, I think, maybe in Dearborn, Michigan, one of those places, back when this became a big deal, even 10 years ago. What's my point overall? I definitely very much believe in the Second Amendment, very much like the defense minister, for both philosophical and operational reasons, in keeping with the Minister of Defense for Norway when he did Why I Chose the Gun, right? He chose the gun as a tool of ensuring people's freedom and safety. He talked about his dad's experience in the Second World War. I also understand the operational nuances as it was defined by, I forgot the ranger's name. He's a combat vet ranger who outlined the limitations of owning firearms, ability to protect your personal safety and political freedom. And that's an argument that has to be had. It has to be had honestly, though. Not like we're going to co-opt every school shooting as a means to serve as a backdrop and engage in emotional ethical hijacking so we can push for gun control because we don't like you right wingers and we're going to milk you for everything you got. And then you get some of the crazier parts like, I think everybody should have access to nuclear weapons. Wow. I, I'm pretty sure it's somewhere between those two. Just saying.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Let's go to Armin first.
Yeah, do want to say the Americans being armed and having the right to be armed is not, it doesn't just protect security in the United States, it protects democracy globally. Okay, because the guarantor for democracy globally is the United States military and its giant ass economy that everybody wants to be connected to, and they're motivated to become a democracy so that they could have better access to the global capital markets and at least move closer to it to become more aligned with America and be able to get its security services, but also access to its very large customer base, its, the purchasing power of its the American citizens. So that, and the fact that America's global model after World War II and then after the Cold War, the nation state framework works better under a democracy than any other system. I mean, you could have a nation state model that is not a democracy, but the way the nation state model has been designed makes it so that a democracy works so well with it. And that whole nation state model is maintained globally by US hegemony globally. So as democracy in non-US countries depends on United States being the global power that it is, and the United States being the global power that it is depends on it being a democracy, and it being a democracy depends on the American citizens being able to fight back against tyranny. So American citizens' right to bear arms protects democracy globally, not just in the United States.
Okay, Kari also wanted to respond.
Yes, I wanted to raise a historical point that could shed some light on where the Second Amendment, or the historical evolution that kind of led up to it, because America was founded by British settlers, and many of the rights in the Bill of Rights you can find corresponding to rights in the English Bill of Rights of 1689, which came in the aftermath of the Glorious Revolution, as it was called, when the Protestant Parliament overthrew the Catholic King James II. And in the English Bill of Rights, there's a series of charges against James II, and one of them is saying that he disarmed Protestants. And so one of the rights in the English Bill of Rights is that Protestants have the right to keep and bear arms. And then in the American Bill of Rights, of course, that's extended to everyone. But in the English Bill of Rights, it's clear that's kind of directed against the king who had just been overthrown.
Okay, thank you. Sherry also put it too.
I'll make this quick, Armin. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic, and there is a difference, but I understand what you're trying to say. Also, I don't want to be in my home when someone breaks through my window at 3 o'clock in the morning, wondering. I want to not say, oh, I wish I had a gun. I want to be thinking, how do I get to my gun? I also do not want to have the government invading my home without a warrant, without any cause, and have no way to protect myself or the people around me. Now I will shut up. But yes, sir. Yes, sir. I get we call it a democracy. It is not. It is a
Okay.
constitutional republic. Thank you.
So Sherry, let me correct you. You corrected me, so I'll correct you. It is absolutely a democracy. What people say when they say United States is not a democracy, what they actually mean is that it's not an absolute democracy and that it's not a direct democracy. A republic, it's a limited form of democracy. It's a representative democracy and it's a limited democracy and it's limited by the Constitution. Every republic is a limited form of a democracy. So there's two types. It's not an absolute democracy. That means that the majority has a say, but the majority doesn't have absolute say. There are certain limitations to majority rule. That makes it the fact that it's the majority has a lot of say makes it a democracy, but not an absolute democracy. It is not a direct democracy, meaning that the laws are not chosen directly by the citizens. They're chosen by the representative that the citizens choose. So republics are a subcategory of democracies. I know different people might have different definitions for them, but a republic is basically, and it's not that a republic could be a limited form of democracy, and that limitation can be introduced with a constitution like the United States, right? And I know that this word sounds like it's a dirty word, but it's also a liberal democracy. Liberal, not in the sense of leftist, but liberal as in classical liberal value. So republics could be limited based on different types of principles, but if so, limited meaning that majority rule is limited, right? So if you have a limited democracy, what are those limitations? If those limitations are classical liberal values, then that would make it a liberal republic, which is again, a liberal republic is a limited form of democracy that has been limited by classical liberal values. But I get what
Well,
you're
damn you, Armin. You're going to have to make me go do more research.
saying.
You son of a gun.
That's okay. Oh no, thank you though.
Okay, and Jose?
Armin, point of order. The Islamic Republic is not a democracy. So your statement that,
Because
okay,
it's not a
I
republic.
just wanted to say that because, right, exactly. But you did make a statement that republics are by definition democratic. You did make that statement. You take it back if you want, but you did make that statement, and that's what triggered me responding to you here. Because just because a republic is using the name doesn't mean that it's a democratic republic. Case in point, Iran. Okay, that's my counter.
Okay,
Just
I'll
logic.
counter. Okay,
Go
I'll
ahead.
counter your counter. North Korea, the official. Wait, let me look at this up to make sure I don't get it right. Don't get it wrong.
Democratic
Official
Republic
name
of North Korea.
Okay. no,
Sorry, Democratic
Oh my God! Say it again. I was gonna look this up.
People's Republic. Democratic People's Republic of North.
Okay, so North Korea has democratic in its name. Okay, that doesn't make North Korea democratic. Okay, the Islamic Republic has republic in its name. That doesn't make the Islamic Republic a republic. So a republic is a democracy. The Islamic Republic is not a republic. That's my counter.
Well stated.
Thank you.
Okay, Kari?
The word republic is used to mean different things, and often the word republic is just used to mean that the country doesn't have a monarch or a hereditary dynasty, and by that definition, the Islamic Republic would be a republic because they don't have a shah.
That's okay. Okay, that is not the correct definition. In fact, a monarchy, a constitutional monarchy, is a republic. Okay, so a republic is when you have sovereignty of the people, right? So a constitutional monarchy has a parliament, as a prime minister, people vote for the representatives. So that I know a lot of people suggest that republic means no monarch. That is not true. A constitutional monarchy is a republic as well. But go on.
My country is a constitutional parliamentary monarchy with a ceremonial monarch and a parliamentary democracy underneath. And in that context, when people here say that they want a republic, what they mean is that they want to get rid of the king.
I understand. That's what usually people mean when they want to say republic, but strictly based on in political philosophy and the actual definitions of the word. That what you're saying is the same in Iran. In Iran, when people say we want a republic, they mean that they're against the king. But if you actually go by how these words what they mean, a constitutional monarchy is a republic. And actually, correct, this might be controversial, but even an absolute monarchy can be a republic if the people of a nation want an absolute monarch. And if the people of a nation say, yeah, we want this guy to be the monarch and he gets absolute rule, as long as they can remove him when they want, even an absolute monarch, I mean, that doesn't exist. This is like in La La Land, in imaginary world. But it can, even in an imaginary country where you have one king with absolute power that can be removed by the people when they don't like him, okay, that also would be a republic. However, that can never happen in practice, because once you get absolute power, then there's no mechanism for people to remove you. But if there was like an imaginary nation where people could be like, yes, we want this guy to have absolute power, as long as sovereignty comes from the people, as long as it's the people deciding that, then that would be a republic, even in an absolute monarchy sense.
Okay, Monkey.
Yes. Now, on this, I would say that the problem here is three things. There's
angry.
three things that we have to look at. There is the practical definition, the common use, and the book definition. Now, we all three could be talking about the same thing, use different words. What we shouldn't do is be so hung up on our definition of the thing that we start fighting about the definition of the thing instead of talking about how it's a good thing, how it's a bad thing, when it should be propped up, when should it be taken down. Because no matter how you define whoever's in charge of North Korea, we agree that it sucks. No matter how you define America, you agree that it's way better than North Korea, right? The United States, I think wisely, didn't put republic or democracy or democracy is nowhere in the paperwork. The word democracy is not in there. That's one of the things that a lot of people love to highlight is nowhere in this paperwork does it say democracy, right? So I think we get hung up on our definitions. Another mistake, because some of us are online and are used to debating, we make every conversation a debate. So every time someone replies, instead of you having a conversation with this person, you wind up having a debate with this person because this person was maybe trying to add to your point. Maybe we're just conversing, sharing different perspectives, and then it gets antagonistic, and that's not what it was supposed to be. It's supposed to be a conversation, right? So sometimes we got to understand one. Let's look at the practical effect because like if we all basically agree fighting about the definition endlessly, it's probably not a good thing. We all know North Korea sucks. Like that type of government, people are probably great, but that type of government, we all know it sucks. The type of government we have in America, we all agree is better. We study the civics of it, and when we get into the civics of it, now that's an interesting conversation. How the power is held, how it's administered, how it changes state to state. Wow, fascinating conversation. If we miss that conversation because we're fighting over the definition, that then we're all missing out. We're not helping ourselves learn from each other. And I'm not going to say you can't argue about the definition. I think we shouldn't get overly hung up on the definition, number one. Number two, let's not turn into every conversation into a debate where you perceive anything that's said by the other person as a counter. because sometimes what the other person's telling you is not a counter. It kind of was here because there was like literally saying, no, I got to push back on that. That triggered me a little bit. But I would put forward that we have more conversations and less debate, at least among us.
Okay, thanks. Let's go to Jilly next.
Hi. In the spirit of that, Monkey, I'm going to just tell you what I learnt when I was studying political economy at university. And that is that democracy has mechanisms. We used to call them participatory democracies. And there are mechanisms for, excuse me, mechanisms for citizens to have a say in the government. Most modern democracies recognize that there is a danger with mob rule. So it's not just majority belief. And like Armin said too, there's the issue of sovereignty of the people. So within modern democracies, when I was studying it, we were taught that the things like I give Australia as an example. We have a division of a separation of powers in the government, such that the different arms of the government have different roles, and within those roles there are certain things that are sovereign, considered sovereign. In Australia, we consider the written constitution to be sovereign to the government, or in particular to the law courts. And the only people who theoretically can change the constitution are the people through a referendum type of vote. But in Australia, unlike, for example, I think Switzerland, we can't initiate a referendum. But if there's enough pressure on a government, we can get it. The whole point of it is we have a say, not the absolute say, but we have a say. And some of the mechanisms that protect that say include free and fair elections, where elections are protected situations, and theoretically kept as fair and honest as possible. And there need to be proper mechanisms for that. These types of things safeguard democracies. And as such, I was always taught that America is, in fact, a democracy. It's just a little different type of a democracy from, say, a British democracy or an Australian democracy, but it's still a democracy that allows people to participate in the government. That was just the contribution that I want to make.
Thank you, Jilly. And then Richard, and we'll move on after.
No, I had it too.
I just wanted to.
Oh,
sorry.
you had,
I had it.
okay.
Armin
Rafael?
first. I'm deferring to Armin.
No,
Okay.
no, Richard, you go
I
ahead
request
first. I
under-
will go after Richard.
Okay, no, I just wanted to quickly add, in American political philosophy, there's really a lot of sense to this. The right to bear arms is sort of the ultimate insurance policy against the government's refusal to acknowledge the consent of the governed. The founding fathers wrote extensively about a government that should be in fear of the people. It's revoking consent and basically revoking a government's legitimacy is an academic exercise unless it's backed up by force. So that is the philosophy, that led to the codification of the Second Amendment.
Awesome.
Now, Armin.
All right. I just wanted to point out that we had a very civil discussion, and this was not fighting. If we're disagreeing with what the definitions are, that doesn't make it fighting. Nobody was triggered. Nobody was fighting against anyone else over what the definitions mean. And it's actually very healthy to talk about definitions of words. Words are how we communicate, and knowing if we are if we all are talking about the same thing before we talk about it is an essential part of a good communication. So understanding if we're talking about the same thing is important. And that's why an exchange over what the working definition is before a conversation is actually something that most people encourage. And I encourage it as well. But beyond the utility of discussing what the definitions are, I think understanding the United States is absolutely a democracy, and what the definition of a republic is also has its additional benefits, because it teaches you, just talking about the definition of a republic teaches you some really essential points and the history of where the idea of republic came from, and why this definition matters also makes people value a republic even more. And why the only form, in my opinion, the only form of a democracy that works is a republic. Because when you talk about what is a democracy and what is a republic, then people stop fighting for democracy and they start fighting for republics, because they see like, oh, the value doesn't come from just being a democracy. The value comes because you could see around the world people saying like, for democracy. Well, absolute democracy is garbage. And sometimes people violate principles of a republic for the sake of a democracy. So many of the United States is a republic, and because it operates based on certain principles in a constitution instead of operating based on just majority rule. That's one of the many reasons why United States is a superpower. So understanding when we define what is a republic and what is a democracy, and we argue the differences between the definitions of these words, then people appreciate a republic even more than before. So they understand what is the tyranny of a majority and why it should be avoided. They understand what are the best limitations to a democracy when you explain what a republic is and why not it's not an absolute democracy. Like, oh, it's a limited democracy. Well, what are those limitations, and how do we decide those limitations? Who decides? If it's not the majority, then who decides those limitations? What are the, how do we come about them? How do we know if these are the good limitations on majority rule? But most importantly, we realize that the condition for you to be a republic, once we talk about these definitions, we learn that sovereignty has to come from the people. At the end of the day, sovereignty has to come from the people. And even the purpose of the limitations are not to be against the people. Like, people think like, oh, you're against majority rule, you want to limit majority rule. Is that against the people if you're against majority rule? No, it's, in fact, it's for the protection. It's for the protection of everybody, including the majority and the minority, right? So this is the most important principles that people need to learn regarding why we are for a republic and not absolute democracies. And these are the working definitions that most people talk about. And I completely understand that different places words have different meanings, and I completely also acknowledge that when people use the word democracy and republic in public, they mean something else. I know that in Iran also, republic usually means not having a monarch. But, and I completely understand that that's also a legitimate use of these words, as long as we all understand which definition. This is why it's important to discuss definitions. If we're going based on that definition, we could continue the conversation based on that definition. But we need to discuss the definitions so that when we're having the conversation, we know which one of these definitions are we using as we're moving forward. For example, the word law means something completely different in math than it means in law school. And it doesn't mean that any of them are wrong, but we need to know what we're talking about before we move forward. Okay. Danny?
Yeah, so unless we have super chats, so we said no more twos on this topic. Unless we have super chats,
Well,
let's go on to CB's topic.
I do have super chats. I saw Jeffrey and like, okay, let's do 30 seconds each and then we'll go. Like maybe 1 minute each.
20 seconds.
No, 1 minute.
Oh, sure. Just the
No.
Oh, go ahead.
No. I was just saying 1 minute. Not, it's okay. Sorry, Danny. No, you know what? Danny is the boss. 20 seconds. Okay, go on.
Okay. Just when leftists try to argue about direct democracy, I always used to ask them, great, so would you have supported direct democracy, say September 12th, 2001? They kind of pause for a minute, right? Of course you wouldn't, because you're an Islamic fundamentalist apologist and you knew we would have dropped 35 nuclear weapons across the Middle East. Don't tell me about like supporting direct democracy out of any basic principle. It's a support based on tactical political expediency, on when people feel, or a hostile actor feels that it's got the numbers to push whatever they want. There's a reason a republic exists and not a direct democracy.
Okay, and Harry?
I just want to say that regardless of what you call it, I'm a supporter of parliamentary constitutional monarchy continuing as the form of government that we have in this country, and I look forward to Iran having it as well.
Me too. That's what I'm going to vote for in a referendum, constitutional monarchy. Oh, in response to that, I also think that the best, Kara, what do you think is the best form of government? The best structure? Is it constitutional monarchy?
Personally, I think yes.
I don't think there is the best one. I think the best one is what the people
Well,
in it.
it's
I think
okay.
I think that liberty, if you give people liberty, okay, in the competition in a free and open society, what the wisdom of the crowd decides for that land is the proper structure of the government for that land. So one form of government, there are certain principles that are work everywhere, but the structure of the government depends on the society, the history, the culture, the geography, the neighbors, and many other things. And there is no way to decide that by any elite group of individuals or philosophers or wise men. You just provide liberty, and the wisdom of the crowd makes the right decision. So if your society with liberty decided that constitutional monarchy is the right answer, then constitutional monarchy is the right answer for that land, for that nation state.
My name is Armin Navabi. I'm an Iranian political analyst with decades of experience fighting the Islamic regime inside and outside of Iran. Make sure you follow me for more, and also make sure you join our discussion group. I'm there almost every single day. Come talk to me there and the rest of the people there in our group calls. It's a great place to meet and talk to people who like talking about politics. The link is in the description and or in the bio. You could also get there by scanning the QR code on the screen. See you there.